This is Build Series Sydney. Danny Clayton is my name, and joining me in the studio, Australian indie synth rock music wizards. Holy round of applause for Tim and Oscar. Hello, boys. How are you doing?
Hello, Danny. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again, particularly with your hair looking so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very exciting. Album has just released, My Own Pool of Light. How'd you celebrate? How'd you do it?
It was more like an angsty trying to stay away from my phone, but also checking it all the time and going on Instagram and sort of then trying to put it down again and looking at things that were happening as we were posting about it. And so the celebration was muted because of that internal kind of panic in my head, basically.
Yeah. Is the modern day album release considerably more stressful because that feedback comes immediately, do you think?
I think it's nice actually to get the feedback immediately because most of it is good. Most people like who are already looking at us online are there because they like us. So it's quite nice. I did have one guy who was like, "Oh, not many guitar solos on the record," and so like he's sort of like, do you say, you know, maybe he might mean that well. He might just love us so much or something. But I just posted back like that emoji that's got the flat mouth like that.
It speaks so much, that emoji.
Yeah.
It's a very clever use of that
just
emoji.
Like that kind of vibe, you know?
Well, I've listened to the album, and I must say I absolutely love it. I think that sonically you've taken it to a really incredibly complex and beautiful place. And lyrically, it's incredibly powerful as well. But it is such a brilliant new direction. You've moved quite far away from paint. What do you think was the reason this has gone in such a delightful new direction?
Well, this is the first record that we self-produced, which was mainly... Oscar's been producing a lot of albums over the last couple of years while Holy has been growing. He produced like Alex Leahy's record and Ali Barter's record, British India, a bunch of other artists. But we were working with Matt Redlick as our producer on the last couple of records. So for this one, we liked the idea of having complete control over it and being able to just get together in any room and work on the album. So it kind of gave us a lot of freedom. And we kind of did want to make a record that was a bit different, that was a bit further away from the band in the room and more, you know, like writing in the computer and composing with synths and with vocal lines and with using even Melodyne sometimes to write melodies, which is kind of like an auto-tune type plugin, but you can actually compose on that. And so... yeah, it was a really fun and creative, like we sort of felt like anything, we were willing to try anything on this record. And generally when we did push ourselves, we liked it and kept it.
I mean, you brought the synths up. I just love the synth. I think that this sound is kind of a modern kind of nostalgia kind of. You could take your music and put it in the TV series Stranger Things, and it would be at home. And that's like a love letter to the 80s. Yeah. So what was it that you were kind of so drawn to when it came to those synths, those synthy sounds?
I guess, firstly, for me, because I play guitar, I was like just a bit bored of the guitar. So trying to just start not with a guitar, so on a keyboard, whether a computer keyboard or like a keyboard. And yeah, you're right about the synth thing, like referencing some of those like things that are now a couple of decades ago. So Stranger Things is doing that. And sometimes nowadays with synths is sort of, you've got this 2-decade time lag, it seems, between where some of those sounds came from and where they are now. And we did a bit of work with Japanese Wallpaper, who's a Melbourne artist and a friend of ours, and he's big on these old like vintage synths. So we did some sessions with him when we were making some of the songs, and he brings a bit of that flavour as well. And I think that also helped kind of inspire us further forward to kind of, take those plunges, basically. Yeah.
Now, lyrically, at times it can be quite a sharp record, and it's really taking stance against some pretty big issues. What was on your mind during this album? What were you thinking about? What were you worried about? What was things that took up your mental energy?
I mean, for me, like songwriting is something that like I don't find that comes easily to me. Like I have to really work on songs, and also I don't tend to kind of go into a studio or into a writing session thinking, I want to write a song about this generally. And so it's usually more a case of us sort of finding a few chords and a bit of a progression and working away until the song starts to kind of have a life of its own. There's usually a moment in the studio where you start to kind of feel the inspiration like tugging, and then the song sort of starts to drag you along. And then we usually kind of have a system where I'm sort of improvising vocals, and then I usually find the story that way rather than like kind of going in from the outside, being like, oh, I want to write a story like this or like that. But that being said, like the album ended up being like each song is quite a different story, and there are a few different things that were on my mind. There's one song about my daughter, and like my experience of like raising a girl in this world, and like reading storybooks to her and finding like that there was just no female characters in these stories, and when there were female characters, they were very two-dimensional and sort of like a 1950s kind of version of the world, and just sort of feeling like by sitting there and reading to her every night, I was creating that reality for her again, like sort of repeating the mistakes of the past, and feeling like I thought we'd come a lot further than we had, and that it's sort of insidious the way it sort of seeps in. And also I read the same books to my son, and so I don't know which is worse, like raising sons who think that way, or raising daughters. So I wrote one song about that and a bunch of other different things. Yeah,
because I think a huge triumph of this record, and I mean a lot of your old work as well, is that they're always nuggets. There's lyrics that seem to kind of stay in your mind, and you're like, oh, great. So much so that I'm not sure if you know this, but I follow Liam Gallagher from Oasis on Twitter, and I think it was like the beginning of this year or even at the end of last year, he tweeted one of your lyrics. I'm like, did they know this? Do you guys...
Oh, yeah, he did do that. It was... I did notice that, and I have remembered it. I've etched it in my brain.
Oh my gosh, this is something you can forget?
It was from Sentimental and Monday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, darkness is nothing but a lack of light.
Lack of light.
All the lyrics are Tim's, by the way. But yeah, it turns out he likes the band.
Yep.
So, which is cool.
He says very casually. I mean, at one stage, I think that he came to one of your shows in London, I believe.
Yeah, he did. That was... luckily, we didn't know he was there until after the show.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would have just ruined the whole experience for us.
I knew he was there.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
just
thanks for not telling me.
Our manager came backstage, and usually I have a deal with her, which is don't tell me anything about who's in the audience.
Yeah.
Like, because sometimes there's, radio people and stuff like that, and I don't like to think about that.
Yeah.
Even having my family in the audience, I sometimes find a bit sketchy.
Especially when the family's in the
and
audience.
And then she came back and she's like, Liam's here. And I was like, fuck. And I did spend pretty much the whole gig, like kind of like sort of staring at the back and thinking about my childhood, like listening to Oasis, and because my sister, I've got a sister who's older, and she had those records, and it was a bizarre experience performing, knowing he was there. But then he chatted to us after, and
we met him after.
All right, mate. Yeah, great show, mate. Like the band, mate.
I was like, oh. Yeah, like your band.
Super.
It's actually really accurate. It's like I'm here with him.
Yeah, and like I was outside because we were in London, and it was just outdoors, and it was like after 10 p.m. and I had like a beer, and I was chatting, and by that point I was a bit like groggy,
wonky.
Yeah, a bit wonky, and I'm like trying to chat to Liam, and then the bouncer comes over and goes, "Mate, you can't have that beer out here. You got to go inside." And I'm like, I'm speaking to Liam Gallagher. Fucking hell, mate, come on. And I could have just put the beer down and just kept chatting to him, but instead I just went, all right, I better go inside with my beer. And I was like, oh, no, beer down, Liam there.
I mean, you know what? I would never recommend anyone say, don't you know who I am? But in that case, you could have definitely said, don't you know who he is? I think I can drink my beer if he lets me.
I felt bad for him because I had some family there and cousins and friends, and they were all getting like selfies with him, and I was like, oh no, don't do that. Stop it.
God, but he was a sport about it? It was a good sport? We're getting
I
photos
think so.
of the
I mean,
family?
he you know what he's like. His face is just always like doing that same kind of. So he's just like looks at the camera.
Yeah, perpetually angry. I
yeah,
think.
he's
Who would you like at one of your shows? Like, if you could have anyone come to a holy song, show, who would it be?
I'm so terrified. As you said before, your heroes can't be your mates. I don't want any of my heroes at our shows because it's just too stressful for me.
Yeah.
But
I said that off camera, so let's not tell that story that I told you.
I know
personal.
that. Yeah, okay.
So you wouldn't want any of your heroes to come to your show. What about you?
I mean, I don't really. It's not something that I ever really. I'd rather be in the audience of their show than have them in the audience of my show. But I don't know, like Sharon Van Etten or like PJ Harvey or something like that. Like just to know, not so much that I'd want to perform for them, but to know that they, felt us worthy of the sort of dirt on their shoe would be.
Yeah.
Some
of my heroes are dead. I always crap on about Freddie Mercury. I want him to come to one of our shows.
Yep.
But why? Like he'd be like. who are these guys? You know, like, yeah.
You're like boring.
Boring.
I could be at home with my cats.
Yeah, totally
what am I
right.
doing here? I mean, because you play around the world, you've done some crazy, extensive touring. It seems like, to me, you guys are men of the world. And I really wanted to talk to you about Berlin, particularly because there's this one line that really sticks with me from David Bowie. And he says, Berlin, a more culturally extravagant place you cannot imagine, because he lived in Alexanderplatz. And I believe that this is a city that's important to Holy Holy. You guys reconnected in Berlin. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, Berlin, and actually, well, so I was living there with another band that I was playing with at the time, which was sort of on the kind of the way out. And it was sort of in a dysfunctional kind of situation. And Tim was living in Stockholm at the time. And so, yeah, so I sort of saw Tim in Stockholm, and we kind of made a song that was one of your songs, I suppose, a Timothy Carroll song. And then you came to Berlin, and we did this sort of hopping between those two cities for I guess a while, and like did some demos in my little share house. And my flatmate, do you remember? She didn't like us making those demos. She didn't enjoy that.
Well,
Yeah.
it was just too noisy.
Yeah, I kept getting myself into bad share houses, and every time I went with my guitar and my computer and all this stuff, and I wanted to make music and make all this noise, and I ended up like having fights with my flatmates. But that seems to happen everywhere I go. So.
Oh dear. So how many share houses have you been kicked out of by now?
I'm trying. Well, I don't know if I want to speak about it. But yeah, we did reconnect in Berlin, and that was a bit of a time.
Because you guys don't even live in the same cities. How do you work with somebody when you don't even live in the same place? Like, are you just on, emails every single day? Like, how often do you talk?
Yeah, as the band has gotten bigger, the sort of administrative side of it has been like, it's immense how much it takes to keep on top of it. So there's that all the time, and phone calls and Facebook messages all the time and so on. And then we get together. I mean, I'm in Launceston, and Oscar's in Melbourne, so we're only like a short flight away, and enough things happen, shows and festivals and recording things and meetings, that we tend to sort of see each other fairly regularly. Like we've often said in the past that we may not even see each other more were we to live in the same place. Because I see Oscar more than I see some of my friends, my friends that I live in the same city as. So it works really well. And we also do a little bit of, recording and sending material back and forth. And then we usually start a tour with a rehearsal session where we'll book out a venue and like set up on the stage and do 2 days of playing the set and sort of getting prepared for the shows.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you said you were from Launceston. I love Launceston. My dad's from Launceston. And I'm really fascinated by this off-the-grid property that you guys worked on, this record inside of. It sounds like a real wonderful place. I mean, what's it like where you recorded this record?
Well, we recorded this record all over the place. Some in Melbourne, some up in Brisbane, in a studio called Plutonium, which was sort of put together by the guys in the band, the John Steele Singers. And we did some in Launceston, in the city of Launceston, in a little studio there. But we did do some sessions out at my country property. I've got 50 acres out in the hills of northeast Launceston. It's like an old gold mining valley. It is a sort of magical place out there, like forested hills and black cockatoos and streams sort of running through the hills and old mining tunnels and stuff in the mountains and I've got a property out there with a few different houses and shacks and a dam and a sauna and stuff out there, and so it's a nice place to be, and there's no power, like no mains power and not much phone reception, so you do kind of feel like you're in another world.
Yeah, it's like a storybook style. I mean, we were talking to Angus Stone about recording his record on his farm, and it's a little bit like a little boy's dream in the sense that he's putting in bowling alleys and he's got a little pond with a sailboat, and yours seems to be like a completely kind of different style, but at the same, very fantastical. Did you get a lot of that inspiration purely from the location that you were surrounded in?
I mean, some of the we kind of almost started the record there, I think, didn't we? The first song we wrote, which was Faces, which was the single we released last year. Which we did that when we were in your sort of the hut overlooking the field with the generator out the back, and like for power, and I did have my laptop, so we had technology, obviously, but yeah, only by virtue of having the generator there. And yeah, it was kind of like, we didn't even know we were starting the record, I think. We just kind of were writing this piece of music and just working on, just having fun and being out there. And for me, it's special in particular because I live in the city. So going out there, it totally puts me in a different headspace. So, yeah, it was pretty nice. And then, yeah, 3 months later, we listened back to that demo and we thought, oh, maybe there's something here, you know?
Because one thing I really find fascinating is that as musicians, you can make a song, but you can't choose where people listen to it. And so for me, I was listening to this record while in Kosciuszko National Park, and I was like, this is perfect. This is where this album should be listened to. Where do you guys want people to listen to this record?
I mean, I guess it's for people will find their own places, but I do enjoy hearing those stories of, you know, people being like, oh, I was backpacking through this part of the world for this album. And so for them, every time they listen to it, it takes them back to that place. And I know there are albums for me that when I hear them, they remind me of certain parts of my life. So it's really exciting to make music and know that it's sort of really becoming a part of people's memories and their stories and things like that.
Now, Panama Festival, that's also held at the Launceston Farm property, isn't it?
That's right.
For someone who has never been to Panama Festival, because I was never really invited, no big deal, but what is it all about? Like, what's it like? Can you describe that festival to us?
Yeah, I started a small music festival around the time that we started Holy Holy, actually. The two things kind of happened at a similar time. And partly it was to be able to have a job that I could, you know, be able to go on tour and, you know, drop everything and be present with the band when the band was busy. And, you know, so I would be like on my computer in the tour van or in airport lounges or in like green rooms, like just sort of organising it. It's just a small festival on this property. It's now like 2,000 people on the site. It's on the same weekend as a couple of other really great festivals that are much bigger. And so oftentimes some like amazing bands and some of our heroes are coming to Australia and they're playing like Golden Plains and WOMAD and Perth Fest. And I think Tasmania, especially for international bands, when they hear that, it has this kind of allure to it. Sounds like somewhere that they want to see. And so we tend to kind of be able to get bands that usually a tiny festival wouldn't be able to get. And so we've had some amazing artists come over the years. We've done 6 festivals now.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said that Tasmania feels like an untouched place for tourism, but within Australia. Like, I feel like loads of people from Sydney or Melbourne, they might go to the Gold Coast or, you know, like maybe even like fly across to Perth, and because it seems really different. But Tasmania has something really special. I mean, what makes you so fond of a place like Launceston in Tasmania?
It's a pretty wild place. Like in terms of traffic, there's no traffic in Launceston. It's kind of like a joke. It's like after 5 p.m, the streets are just completely empty, which is kind of scary at times. I remember like taking Oscar over there from Melbourne. He's like, "Where is everyone?"
Yeah, zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, I felt a bit zombie apocalypse. It's probably a good place to be when the zombie apocalypse hits, actually. Yeah,
but
zombies
it's like
can't swim.
super beautiful, and I mean, I like the climate. It's pretty cool, and you know, there's a couple of weekends ago, I just drove up the mountains and we could go skiing, like just right near Launceston. And it's changing a bit though with Mona and Dark Mofo and Monofoma. They're like that kind of undiscoveredness of it is changing, and now it's become like a really big destination for people. And they're doing Dark Mofo in the middle of winter is kind of like a stroke of genius by them, because usually that's a time when Tasmania just goes to sleep. No one comes. And now it's actually one of the busiest times for the island, and it's crazy. And what they're doing artistically is really brave and interesting.
Yeah, it is incredible. The photos I've seen make it look very otherworldly. Now, you have a huge tour coming up, massive. You're going all across Australia in September, up to the pointy end, I believe you said. When you're about to embark on a big festival tour like this, or just your own shows, how do you prepare? How do you get ready? Is there a way to get match fit before shows like this?
I always feel underprepared, but I like feeling underprepared because it kind of makes me more like alert or something like that. Like I feel like I have to like work harder or something like that. But we do a lot of, because as you say, we live in separate states. Do a lot of talking on the phone, a lot of emailing, deciding what we're going to play, which songs we're going to play, where we're going to put them in the set, how we're going to play them. So there's all these like weeks and months leading up to it, and then we tend to sort of slide in, sort of just quickly do a couple of rehearsals and then bang, we have to start playing. And
We took a couple of shows these last few weeks. We played a show at the Odeon in Hobart for a festival, and then we did the show up at Threadbow for an après event. And those shows are kind of like little test shows for us to try some of the new material and see what works. And it's a great opportunity for us to road test the show that will then run out for the festival. But usually by the end of the tour, we've got it dialed.
by the time the tour finishes,
and then,
it's
then
good.
we go away.
And then you just wait to the next album to try all that new stuff. By that stage, it doesn't even work anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
gosh.
yeah. We're bored of it. Yeah, I mean, we always want to play the newest stuff, you know. So if we start writing songs again soon, then we'll be like, oh, do we have to play the new album? Can't we play the new song that we just wrote that no one's heard yet?
Yeah.
But that's just the way it is.
Yeah. What about the actual spectacle, the show? What can people expect to see from these shows? Smoke machines, flames, lasers. Tell us, boys. What have you got?
I want lasers. I do want lasers.
I would love lasers.
We would love lasers.
It's a budget. It depends how the ticket sales go.
Does anyone not want lasers? Is there ever a time that someone's... Do you want lasers? And someone says no? I mean...
I don't know. I mean, you don't see enough of them around, I feel. I want to see lasers at every show I go to.
But one thing we want to do on this album, there's portions of the album that are like sort of suites of songs that run together. So one song kind of bleeds across into the next song. And
Track 10, which is called 10.
Which is called 10. Yeah, it's very creatively titled.
It is a very beautiful introduction. And yeah, it seems like that would be something that would go very well in a live situation.
I just wanted to have 12 songs on the record, so cajoled him into letting us have one like minute-long instrumental piece of music to make one of those tracks, so we could go from 11 to 12, basically.
I didn't know that was your motivation.
That was my motivation.
Finding that out now.
He doesn't like odd numbers.
I hate odd numbers. Yeah. Oh my God, they're the worst. Yeah.
But we've been working on performing the beginning part of the album. It's just like 5 songs that all kind of go into each other as one big long suite. If we can pull it off, it's kind of like surprise. Yeah. The difference it makes is actually quite surprising. You'd think it wouldn't. The difference of just stopping and like having a moment and going again and just rolling them all into one. It's like it's kind of like a bit of a roller coaster to just do one after the other. But that's one thing that we're working on for the live show. Yeah,
and I mean, a lot of the stuff on the new record, it has more of a like we focused a lot more on having a beat that's really driving the music instead of letting the guitars kind of like be the sort of feature. So Ryan, our drummer, he's really pushing a lot of that. And so, yeah, with what Tim's saying about having songs roll into them, trying to create an atmosphere that's sort of like up like the whole way through more, you know, like this keeps people moving. Yeah.
And blending all the new songs with the old songs and making them kind of work in almost like a story arc, I guess, would be quite challenging. But
yeah, sometimes like
cool.
we sometimes we play a show and we don't get it right. And we come off and we're like, oh, that song at that point there in the middle of the set, that was not the right bit, you know? So, yeah, that takes a bit of ironing out. But, yeah, once we get the arc right, they work well together.
As Hugo from Flight Facilities once said to me, he's like, peaks and troughs. For a perfect band set, you have to go up, but then you have to bring them back down.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very wise.
Well, and that's true for Flight Facilities. Like, so much of their stuff is like that, you know? Down, then up, down, then up. Yeah.
Now, we do have some questions coming in from the audience. Nat wanted to ask, what's behind the name of the band, Holy Holy?
It's kind of like a lot of different things. I was trying to come up with a band name for about a decade before Holy Holy started, and I started having a bit of a fascination with double like words that would exist as a pair. For a range of different reasons, and I was trying different combinations, and then, but like broadly, I guess Holy Holy, we kind of felt that music at its best, like when you're doing a gig, and it's really working, and there's a sort of a connection with the audience, and you know you can really feel something, then it is kind of like a holy experience, you know, and so that's kind of what we're always striving for. So I think that sort of sits behind what we do and how we write and how we perform.
Feels like church going to a Holy Holy song.
I think that concerts, like sometimes music and celebrity is a bit like modern day, like religion,
like preachers.
Well, like you know, this like.
I mean, look at Kanye, Jesus.
Yeah, it's all that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that there is an element of that, you know. Yeah.
Okay, we have some more questions. What's the best gig that you've ever played, and why? That was from Penny.
I mean, there's a few different ones that come to mind for me. Do you remember we were in Barcelona and we did
nice,
Primavera. And we just had a couple of like glorious days wandering around Spain and drinking beer and having late night tapas. And then they put us on this stage that was overlooking the water and the sun was setting, and we were just like, what even is life kind of thing. So that was pretty early on and sticks with me.
Yeah, that was pretty special. And there was some amazing acts playing that festival as well. So yeah.
Shane wanted to ask you, how hard is it to get your level in the Aussie music scene?
How hard is it to get our level?
Get to your level. Sorry, I can't read. How hard is it to get to your level in the Aussie music scene?
It depends. Some people seem to find it easy. I don't know. Like it's so many different routes. We took one that we've been kind of doing this, and it's felt really nice, and we've had a good time. And I've had bands where we've struggled and not really worked out, and then some people seem to go ping like that.
Dare I say that like blogs were really helpful in your discovery? In the sense there's been a fair bit of support from the online community with your music?
I think we've had that, and we've obviously had some radio that's helped a lot. And like I think we got some good supports early on with some bigger artists, and that helped us. And then little things happen along the way, like old mate Liam and his like tweet. Even if it's funny the way the world works, little things like that just go boom like that.
I think fundamentally, like, it's true what Oscar's saying, and especially now, because some people now put one song on Unearthed and then within a few months they're on Splendor and they're on high rotation, so it can happen really quickly. But I think maybe the characteristic that is across anyone who has some success is like the quality of the songwriting and being having something to offer that's interesting for people to hear. So if someone's wanting it, I think maybe putting in the work and making sure that what you have to offer is worth it before like throwing it out into the public domain could be.
Yeah.
Can it be frustrating when you see someone release one really great song and it having so much support and then getting booked to play all those gigs?
I mean, I would never want to sort of go like that sort of envy and is not really like, I think it's just great to see people doing well and finding a path, and I wouldn't ever feel that way of someone else's success.
I think anyone who achieves success, they're connected in some way with other people. They've had a connection that is real, that means something, even if it's not a genre that I love or a style or an approach that's my thing. They've connected with someone, and that's what's important, I guess. So
you're more likely to go, props on you, man. Like, well done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, wow, fuck, you did this cool thing, and look what's happened. Like, that's amazing, Yeah.
Certainly. All right, one more from the crowd. What has been your most loved collaboration, and what artist do you want to collaborate with in the future? And you can't say Liam Gallagher.
Can't say Liam Gallagher.
You can't. Absolutely. not.
Noel Gallagher. No.
No, that's a loophole.
Yeah, that's not nice.
Sorry,
Liam.
tricky.
Yeah. Who would I love to collaborate with? I feel weird about collaborating. I feel like Tim and I have worked together for a few years, and we've had some we've got this collaboration that works really well, I think, at the moment. And it's really hard to find a good person to collaborate with. But when I walk into the room with someone to write a song or do something, it's like it's like almost like going on a first date or something like that. It's quite like, is this going to work? Are we going to connect? Are we going to make a good song? Are we going to like each other? All that kind of stuff. Not that you write a song on your first date, but like...
What, you don't?
Yeah. But like, I feel like every new collaborations, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm so like in my head about it that it's nice to be able to fall back on this one. Well, not fall back on it, but have this one that's just been quite fruitful and worked really well and sort of continues to grow and change. And so as far as new people, I'm like, oh, do I have space for a new person to bring into my life?
Is that really lovely for you to hear? That?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel the same.
I don't know
way.
about you. That's very sweet. Do you want to say something nice to him now?
I'm hoping
gosh,
he
he
says
just
something back.
poured his heart out to you, man.
No, it's been like, obviously, like the fact that we live in different cities, but we make the effort to kind of still work with each other. Like, it has been a fun project, and I think the reason why we've enjoyed working together is kind of our skill sets are like the opposite of each other. Like, Oscar's a really talented composer and guitarist and producer, and my strengths lie in like singing and lyric writing and storytelling through song. And so, we kind of like our work kind of goes well together to form a project. But also to your question about collaborations, on this record, we wanted to do some collaborating, especially because we were self-producing and we didn't want to kind of just go crazy within our own little team of 2 or 3. We worked with Japanese Wallpaper, as we mentioned earlier, and we worked with this producer from Melbourne called Andre Ehrman, who's an amazing artist and has done some really cool projects of his own under the name Ghosting. So he kind of reworked the beginning of our track Starting Line. And then we also worked with Ali Barter and Ainsley Wills, who came into the studio a couple of times and added their vocals to like layers of moments in the record. And we've worked with them in the past, and I always love working with both of those guys.
I mean, because really, you see so many bands that have become very, very successful, ones that collaborate or stick together, and it's quite common to see bands come and go. And it seems like you guys have really found some sort of magic, some sort of longevity between you two. I mean, would you ever have seen this occurring when you first met, when you were teaching English in Southeast Asia? Is that what happened?
We were just little grummies, and like we were fresh out of school and going. I thought I was going to save the world, and I thought I was like I had the answers. So I did this we did this teaching English like placement over in Southeast Asia, and I know I didn't teach much English, but enjoyed the time and met Tim, and we were there with some other people, and we had our guitars and we wrote some really weird songs, and that was I didn't even know what life was at that point, and then we didn't see each other for years after that, and I would have never have thought that we'd be sitting here right now talking about a third record,
Definitely not. I mean, even after we recorded the first album, I remember I was trying to find a manager, and I remember in the meeting with the manager, I said, if I can break even on the recording of this first album, because we had paid for it ourselves, I was like, I'm happy. Like, that was the only goal. So certainly it's gone much further than...
And the manager's like, we need to aim a bit higher than that.
Yeah. And fast forward a few years, you are sitting talking to me about the latest album, and also travelling around the world, crashing tour vans, I hear.
I'm not crashing any tour vans.
I crashed a tour van.
At least you're wearing it.
Yeah.
How badly?
It wasn't so much a crash, it was a gouge. But the bad thing about it was they have these vans over there that are called Sprinters. I think they're Mercedes Sprinters. They're really long, and there's like a hangout spot, and then behind that there's like a van where you put all the gear. So it was much longer than...
They're big.
I realised, and I just got off a flight from Australia, so I was like groggy driving through London, and there was like the Royal Cavalry and stuff like going down, and all these Union Jacks and things. I was like, wow, this is really English. And then got into like East London, and the road started getting smaller, and I took a corner, and we felt this kind of doosh, and the bass player was like, oh, I think the gear's just moving around in the back, and I was like, okay, that's what it is. And then we got out, and it was just completely torn, the whole side of it, and it was the hire company, it was the first time they'd let that vehicle out. It was brand new, a brand new Mercedes, like with leather interior and stuff, and I had just opened it like a tuna can the whole way down the side. On day one of the tour, and I was I was nauseous with anxiety.
I was in the plane at this time coming over from Melbourne, and I landed and I thought, oh great, we've got the van, the guys can pick me up from the airport, it'll be awesome. And I got there, found Wi-Fi. Hey guys, I'm just here, blah blah blah. And Tim's like, I'm not coming to get you. I think I might lie down for a while.
Oh no!
I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I think I took a sleeping tablet and lay down on the floor because the ACOM didn't have a bed.
And I was all pissed off. I'm like, what? I've got to get a cab and all this stuff with all my gear. And I got there and I saw the van. I'm like, oh
dear.
Shit.
I mean, look, it could have been worse. When you heard that bang, you could have seen a nun on the side of the road, and that would have
That's true.
really ruined the tour. Or depend on how you feel about
Holy.
Yeah, holy.
Holy. Accident.
So a real treat for everyone here is that you're about to perform one of the singles from the album, Teach Me About Dying. Can you tell me a little bit about this particular song, what inspired it, where it came from, really?
We wrote this one in Launceston, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, this is one of those rare songs, especially for us, that it like came out quickly. Like we sort of hit the idea, got a bit of momentum up, and within like 3 hours we had it pretty much wrapped, which doesn't usually happen for us. There was a little Casio, which we'll play later, a little Casio keyboard in the studio that we were in. And I think it was just between songs. I was waiting. Oscar's often like doing something on the computer that is, I don't know what he's up to, but he's clicking.
Extremely important.
And looking sort of
just on Reddit.
Furrow brow. Yeah. And I'm like just trying to not be on my phone. So I was playing with this keyboard and found this beat, like the pop beat, and I was like, pop, that's what we want. And I started just playing, and I think at one point Oscar kind of looked over his shoulder, and then like put a mic in front of me and put a mic in front of him, and we just sort of rolled out this progression. And that was one song that I actually did go into it. I had this idea of a chorus that was teach me about dying so I can learn how to live, which was something I'd heard on a podcast about the way that how we talk about death, and how that's evolved over time. But kind of like the idea behind it being that even though it's kind of morbid in some ways, remembering that, and so remembering what limited time we have together, and trying to not hold on to like grievances and like petty kind of insecurities and so on, and is something that I want to do more in my life. So that was kind of like what the song was kind of about.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like the philosopher Alan Watts, how he says that every human should study death because it's very regenerative to living and to life. So definitely some deep stuff there, and we're really excited to hear it. But boys, thank you so much for this quick chat. Can we get a round of applause for Holy Holy?
Thank you.
Thanks.